Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Constantia Nek Podcast, where we talk about everything related to the Two Oceans Ultramarathon. We're really getting into the thick of things at the moment, and really happy to have you guys all with us again for another episode. As usual, I'm joined by Shona. Shona, thanks for being here again today.
Yeah, thanks, Dev. Thanks for, having me and hosting me. That I'm looking forward to this. Definitely are getting into the thick of it, really.
Good stuff. Yeah, guys. So as I said, we kind of going to be diving in today's main focus around nutrition and hydration. So how to plan, whether it's training, whether it's racing, your nutrition strategies. So that's going to be really the gist and the crux of today's episode. Before we get there, I think we're about 8 weeks out now, if my maths is correct. There probably are a couple of tender bodies out there, knowing that some of you have maybe run the Baldwin Sports JP Marathon this weekend. Sean, maybe just on that, have you got any advice for those of our listeners who have run that marathon this weekend?
Yeah, Dev, that's a great question, because if you have just qualified, whether it's Baldwin Sport JP or any of the other marathons this weekend or coming up, it's really, really key that you take some recovery, okay? And I know that means different things to runners, so let me be specific. It is really, really key that you take time off from running before getting into your next plan. All right, so generally after qualifier, I'd recommend at least a week off, and then you can start easing into your training again the following week. Especially if you've run that race hard. So if you are a back of the packer and you've really, really run that hard, or even if you are a faster marathon runner and you ran that race hard, it is absolutely key that you take some time off and recover the body. And then perhaps, after the first week, you can start easing back into it again. And even with some light cross training or some light strength as well.
Awesome. Sean, and that actually kind of, I suppose, brings us into our first sort of lead in here. Again, around the training side of things. So where should people be at the moment?
Yeah, so really entering into a peak phase of training. Of course, if you've just qualified, you've just come out of that. And as I mentioned, now you're going to have some recovery time. You're going to have some time off from running. If you have already qualified, sort of a couple of months ago or last year, of course, now we're getting into the peak of our oceans training. We really are building up our volume of training. We're building up our, perhaps gradually building up our long runs. And even with that, you might also be building up a couple of your midweek long runs as well. So those that perhaps were only an hour might move up to about an hour 20, hour and a half. Those midweek long runs, we don't generally move over 90 minutes for those. But yes, we are overall building the volume of our training. Okay, so if you have also qualified, there's a chance perhaps that you are also going into a phase of strength building. And I'm not talking strength like we always carry on about. I mean running strength. So that might mean that we're building some hill repeats and hill work into our training as well. But if you haven't qualified, you may still be building in terms of volume, and perhaps then for a marathon, some speed endurance. So again, just trying to decipher whether you have qualified or not. And if you're qualifying in the next week, you are definitely probably going into a taper period where we're going to get you ready for that race. So a couple of moving parts there, but at the end of it, we're in a peak kind of phase.
Sean, you mentioned in the phase that they are doing hill repeats and some strength work or strength for running at the moment. Maybe just break that down a little bit for us. So how many intervals, what kind of intervals, what are we talking about hill repeats? Are we talking about max sprints? Maybe just go into that in a bit more detail if you could.
Perfect. So again, depending on your level and your experience, those hill repeats may be 1 to 2 minutes long. Generally for strength building for running, we're looking at 2 minutes hill repeats. And you starting off, probably if we are doing 2 minutes, you're probably going to be doing around 4 times 2 minute repeats. And then so the way that would work is you find a hill, and I'll go into the type of hill in a sec, but you find a hill, you run for 2 minutes up that hill, and you have an easy back down. I'm not too fussy about the amount of time you take to get back down. Obviously, don't dawdle. Generally, if you're running up for 2 minutes, I normally suggest around a 2.5, maybe 3 minutes, sort of coming back down. Easy, and you repeat that 4 times over. The hill is important, okay? Because people think the steeper the better, and that is really not the case. The steeper your hill, if you go out and find the steepest hill possible, you're putting yourself at a risk of injury, right? So you've got to understand, however steep that hill is, your Achilles takes a lot of strain pushing you up that hill, and the amount of power and force that's required to get up that hill is a lot. So we don't recommend the steepest hill possible. You want to find a gradient of a hill that's around 3 to maximum 6%. And guys, that's really not as steep as you think it is. And the goal here is that we're trying to build the amount of repetitions that are consistent on top of each other at a hard intensity. So they're not maximum. And so we definitely don't want to find a steep hill for that purpose. You're running them at about a rate of perceived exertion out of 10 of around 7 to 8. So it's definitely not a maximum effort. And you're running it hard, recovering and repeating that. And the goal there is that we want those intervals, the first one to be in line with the last one. So you don't want to start too hard and die a slow death. And equally, you don't want to start too slow and increase your pace. You want to have a hard, sustained effort for all of those repetitions.
Sean, I know, again, you mentioned we love to hop on about strength training because it's so critical. But again, just strength training at this phase, where are we? Can people still be starting out now if they're not doing it already?
Yeah, definitely. So I was speaking strength for running strength with the heels. Of course, resistance training and that type of strength training is always going to be your biggest ally in a race like Two Oceans Ultra, right? I mean, it is the Constantia Nek Podcast, and trust me, if you haven't done that, when you get there, you're going to understand why. If you've run it, you'll also understand why. And so yes, it's not too late to start with some strength training. This is, if you haven't started yet, I'd say now's the time. Like, now you have to get involved with some strength work. And if you haven't done any strength work, that's just basic body work, body weighted sort of work. So you're not going into the gym and suddenly deadlifting and squatting hundreds and hundreds of kgs. We're starting light and we're progressing slowly. If you have been doing some strength training and consistently, then yes, we can start adding a little bit of load onto that, onto those sessions and onto those exercises. But only if you have been consistent with that in the last couple of weeks.
Awesome, good stuff. All right, Sean. So the real reason we're here today, the nutrition side of things, and I know this can be daunting for a couple of people. I also know it's the last thing a lot of people think about, having seen some people on the road. And I know we have briefly spoken about nutrition in previous podcasts, but I want to go into a little bit deeper today. Why is it important, and what should people be thinking about and considering when it comes to nutrition?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, as you say, Dev, I mean, we run races as training runs, and I never, ever see people eating. And then I'm stopping and eating, and someone runs past and goes comment like, oh, no walking in running shoes, or so, something like that. And so it is just absolutely key, guys. So I want to get into the nitty gritty of what during your session, but let me just touch on briefly what we want before a session. I'm not generally a fan of people training in a fasted state. So if you're doing a run in the morning, the last time you would have eaten was the night before. And so essentially you're in a fasted state. I am not generally a fan of that. And so I do recommend that you have some form of fuel before you start your run. And really, guys, that's key, because on race day, you're going to want to eat, and then you're going to stand in the pens for a while and then start. So the time that you definitely don't want to start your race in a depleted state. So we need to train our gut for this. Okay. So starting, you want to have something beforehand, whether that is a slice of toast, whether it is some oats, but we want to ensure that we're starting our training and our race not in a depleted state. Okay. So that's key. I struggle to eat because I always get that argument back. People go, Shona, I don't like eating. It affects me. I personally struggle to eat, but for race day, you have to eat something. You can't just have something small. So you got to start training your body to do that. And of course, you're going to get up a couple of hours earlier on race day. So before, if you do struggle to eat, something I recommend is just having a small glass, a 250 ml glass, if not more, of fruit juice, right? And preferably a berry juice, because the fructose is the orange juices are quite high in fructose, which can affect your gut. So a berry juice, like a cranberry, a blueberry juice, that's really great before training to just ensure that you're not starting in a depleted state. And then, as an example, before my race day, what I normally have is a slice of toast with some peanut butter on that. And then after your training, you definitely want to ensure that we're putting back what we used in that session. And part of that is looking after your recovery, because that allows you to then be ready for your next session the next day or the day after that. Okay. And so that, from that perspective, we want to replace muscle glycogen, which is essentially carbohydrates. Okay. And I know we've touched on this before in a previous episode, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail there. Go back and have a listen to that. But yes, generally we're looking for 4-to-1 carb protein ratio. And I mean, the ideal there for me anyways is a steri stumpy. All right. And so when we're talking about what during our sessions, this is really pivotal, guys. Okay. And it's something that we have to practice now. This is the time to be practicing it, and the long runs are there for you to practice this. And the reason for that is that we want to learn how our body responds, or how our gut responds to all of the nutrition. Okay. So we want to learn about that. We also want to get an idea of how easy it is to carry these things, how easy it is to consume them. And so now is the time you need to experiment with that. All right. It's really important that you try experiment with real food, try experiment with gels, bars, different drinks, and we'll go into a lot of detail of what is required now. But really, rather have a bad training run now because of something that you've done nutrition-wise, trying to figure this out, than perhaps on race day, right? That could be the worst thing. You definitely want to control your controllables and ensure that you're getting all of that stuff right now in your training, as opposed to on race day.
Cool. Sorry, Sharon, trying to find the button here to get me back on
Fine,
speed.
Dave. Multitasking, I understand. It's not
Really
necessarily
bad
a male's skill, right? Sorry.
Yeah. So Sharon, so obviously, like you say, need to be training now, not having a bad run. But what are we talking about fueling? I mean, you say we need to be practicing and getting our gut used to it and all that. But what are you talking about? What is fuel? And how much and how often should we actually be thinking about this as well?
If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah. So we're talking carbohydrates. Okay. So that is essentially the fuel that we use when we are running. Okay. So that, or doing any kind of endurance sport. Lots of people often ask me, what about protein? Yes, you can complement your carbohydrates intake with protein, especially in a race like Oceans, because the muscles do take a little bit of a beating, but not at the expense of carbs. Okay. So the most important thing is that you are taking in carbohydrates, and the ideal is anywhere between 40 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. There is a lot of research at the moment that's saying that that number should be going up to 90 grams of carbs per hour. Guys, that is a lot of carbs. Okay. So if you're not anywhere near taking in that, don't go into that. We want to build this up slowly, and essentially 40 to 60 grams of carbs is enough. Okay. And as it is, I don't see people taking in 40 grams of carbs anyways, normally. You're right. So as I mentioned, though, if you haven't been taking in enough, just start small, because the gut will react to that. Okay. So if you haven't been taking anything, start taking 20 grams, build that up to 30 grams, and perhaps by race day, you can be on about 40 grams. Okay. Just to give you an example of what is 40 grams of carbs. I know Dev uses these as well, but I utilize the Race Food Far Bar and Fast Bars. Those have anywhere between 13 to 16 grams of carbs in one bar. Okay, so you would need to have 2 of those bars, if not more, to be getting the minimum amount. Okay, so a Far Bar is around that. A gel is normally around 20 grams of carbs. So again, 2 gels every hour. I don't know anyone who can sustain that sweetness. That's quite a bit. To give you an idea, around some fruits, 1 big banana is around 30 grams of carbs. A third of a cup of raisins is about the same. 5 prunes. Gosh, I don't think prunes would be a good idea for running, but just to give you an idea. And then, of course, if we're talking some beverages, so 300 mils of Coca-Cola, right? So if Coca-Cola is being served on the day, we only have a little cup, right? And that's not going to be enough every hour. Okay. And then of course your Energates and your Powerades as well can contribute. And then sweets. So something like Jelly Babies, 6 Jelly Babies is around 30 grams of carbs as well. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how what is in 30 grams or 40 grams of carbs. And so, yeah, you really, really need to work this out. To give you an idea, I mean, I was, like, as I say, I was using one of those bars, and I was having half a bar every half an hour. So essentially 1 bar in the hour. So I was only getting 16 grams of carbs in an hour, which wasn't enough. So now I complement that, and I use an energy drink. I actually just use Game. I mean, it reminds me of my childhood, to be honest, but I actually just use Game, and I have 500 mils in a soft flask, and I sip on that for an hour. That's 20 grams plus the bar in the whole hour. So that works out to around 36 grams of carbs. And I definitely know that I need to be doing a little bit more. So that is really, really key. So figure that out, play around with things. You need to figure out what you like. You need to figure out what's going to work with your gut. As an example, I'm not a massive fan of gels. I do use gels as well, but I don't like the very textury gels. So I use the ISO gels because they're just not as textury. But you need to figure out what works for you, because you really, really do need variety. All right, and so that is absolutely key. And guys, the last thing I just want to say on this is that you're going to be running a race that's going to take you anywhere between 4 hours if you're running next to Gerda and them, and up to 7 hours. And so you also need to learn to eat whole food on the day. You can't survive those 6 or 7 hours on gels and juice and bars. Okay, so you do need to figure out what you can do from a whole food perspective. A sandwich sort of somewhere along the race. I normally have my friends waiting for me just after Heart Bay, so that's around 34, 35 Ks, and I have a sandwich. And I know we spoke about this in the half podcast, Dev, but my first Oceans, I love a peanut butter salmi. I love peanut butter. And my friends waited for me, gave me this peanut butter salmi, white bread, because it digests very easily. And I didn't quite think it through that your mouth is already dry. And all I had was peanut butter coming off the top of my palate for the rest of the race, which was not fun. So now I've learned just some peanut butter and some honey, some jam. Love banana bread. That's a great idea. Hot cross buns. But the key thing here, of course, again, is that you have to practice this, and you have to make sure that it agrees with you when you are going to be running such long distances.
Yeah, I love you mentioned banana bread. Also, when I'm out on the bike doing long rides, my best thing is to pack some banana bread. It's almost my excuse to go out for a ride, just to take some banana bread.
Yeah. I love banana bread every day, let alone just when running. Definitely.
Sean, I think also maybe just sort of a point on that when you're talking around the need for practicing, not just training your gut and getting used to what works and what doesn't for you, but you've mentioned things like whole foods and the amount of gels and the amount of bars you might actually need. I suppose it's also really important to then figure out, because it's so much, how you're going to carry this. So that's where the planning really comes in, is to making sure that you are able to, it's ease of carrying with you. And like you say, if you do have a friend along the way that can maybe help out with some of that stuff, that's also stuff that needs to be thought about, and you need to be practicing at the moment, whether it's a race belt, I suppose, or anything along the way.
Yeah, exactly. I used to detest running with a hydration vest, but I mean, it just works because I ran a lot of races on my own. I don't always have people, if I'm running overseas anyways, to help and second. So those have come in handy. If you do have people on the route, of course, yes, that's going to be very helpful. What I would recommend, those plan for the worst. I have had a situation before where my friend's now husband didn't skipped us on the route and couldn't find us. So he landed up cycling and catching us afterwards to bring us our stuff. But yes, it threw us completely because we'd run down a Kaapstad that year and didn't actually have any water or anything at the top of there. So plan for the worst. Always keep something as an extra so that you've got it. Check out what the nutrition stations or the water tables have and where they're going to be, so that you can plan all of that well before the race, so you know what's coming up. And Oceans is great. Oceans really advocates for, they're trying to monitor their waste and not have a big, sort of footprint. So they really do advocate that you carry a hydration vest, and they have filling stations and so on as well. Yes.
Awesome. Sean, before we actually get into the hydration side, just one more thing on the nutrition side of things. What's your thoughts around using caffeine?
Yeah, I like it. So personally, I like it. Let me go through this, not my personal thoughts, but let me take you through what the science says. From a scientific point of view, caffeine has been shown to delay fatigue. So essentially, what they do is they do time to exhaustion tests, and people who use caffeine exhaust much later than those who don't. Okay, so it is a very good ergogenic aid. It is a great aid to use, but it does wreak havoc on the gut very often. So you really, really, really need to figure out if your gut agrees with it, and then use it, guys. And we're not talking a cup of coffee here. We're talking caffeine infused gels, caffeine tablets, things like that. There's a new thing out at the moment, which is caffeine gums, which is really effective because it releases the caffeine a lot quicker. So yes, I think it can be a really good performance enhancing aid. But if it agrees with you and if you've practiced it in your training, so make sure that you practice it. It's something I'd suggest you use towards the end, or the latter parts, because it's one of those that you would almost have to keep topping up as well. You don't want to spike and drop. Personally, what I do is coming down Chapman's as you get into Hart Bay, I normally take a little little caffeine tablet. And those, so if you're taking a tablet or a gel is a little bit better, but a tablet will take around 30 minutes for it to work, because I want that little kick as I'm going up Constantia Nek. So yes, it is something you can use, but please, again, practice it and make sure that it agrees with you.
Awesome. So now you spoke about hydration vests and carrying that stuff and the different water tables. Talk to us a little bit about hydration itself. So what are the factors that we need to be considering here? And actually maybe just go into what is hydration first. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so for the most part, it's water, right? And we need that water because that's what our cells are made of. And of course, there's water moving in and out of the cells. And as we're exercising, we're sweating and we're losing some of that. So that is key. But we do also require electrolytes. So sodium and potassium really work to ensure how much water is getting removed in between the cells. And so electrolytes are helpful, okay? But I just want to make this very, very clear that electrolytes are not your carbs, okay? So lots of people we say, tell us about your nutrition strategy. They go, well, I had a rehydrate here, and I had this electrolytes tablet here, and that is not carbs. So rehydrate does have, especially the rehydrate sports, it has, I think it's got 10 grams of carbs, so it's not enough though. Okay, so make sure that you are having electrolytes not in substitution for your carbs. And so they are important. It is good to have, especially on very hot days. So when days are very, very hot, you want to make sure that you're taking in more water so that you don't necessarily get nauseous from all of the carbohydrate that you're taking in. And of course, you may be sweating a little bit more. So we want to ensure that you're getting in enough water and electrolytes. But the key thing here, guys, is that there's not old school sort of thinking was that you drink X amount of milliliters, every X minutes. And we've moved away from that for certain reasons. And really it's around drinking to thirst. Okay. So, drink as you're thirsty, not when you're absolutely parched, sort of make sure that you're grabbing, water packs or filling up your pack, every now and then. So, but drink to thirst. That is the key thing. And as I mentioned, Oceans really are super keen on you having your own pack so that you can fill it up, so that we can obviously try not to litter too much, and please don't litter anyways. Please hold on to your packs and throw that stuff away. But again, I think it's key, just plan for the worst here. So if you're coming past a station where you're like, my pack is fine, I don't need to fill up, or I don't need to grab these sachets, rather just grab them, because you don't know. There have been races and particular years where things have happened. The wind is blown like crazy. And I know at the top of Chappies, they're trying to minimize the amount of plastic. So they have cups, and just make sure that you grab more than one cup, even stop and have more, because there's less water in those cups than there are in the sachets. Okay. So obviously Oceans are trying to do their best for the environment. They can't always control the elements. And so rather just plan for the worst, fill up before you get to, climbing up Chappies. I know there's always a station, water point there. But yes, of course, just plan for the worst and make sure that you'll be okay on race day.
Sure. What about around this? I mean, you spoke about hot conditions, and I'm someone who sweats profusely. So does that have an impact on how much we should be taking in from a hydration point of view?
Yeah, it does. It definitely does, because if you're sweating a lot, and in particular, if your sweat is very salty, so if there's that sort of residue, you're obviously losing a lot of electrolytes. So we want to make sure that you're taking in a little bit more than you usually would, or more than your running partner or your friend. And so the way to work that out, or to see, I mean, aside from, you can't really, like you say, you sweat a lot. Okay, so you have to take in a little bit more. But on a day where perhaps there's a lot of wind, you dry and that sweat evaporates, you don't really know. So you can measure this. So the way we do it is you would weigh yourself before your run. You'd go out for your training run. You'd come back and you'd weigh yourself. Of course, we have to take into consideration the stuff that you've eaten in that run. But overall, that is a generally decent equation to use. Let's say you weigh 50 kgs before the run, you go out and you run and you come back and you weigh 48 kgs. That's two liters essentially of water loss. And so you need to make sure that you are taking in at least that amount during that time of a run. Interestingly, and I know you and I chatted about this the other day, some Garmins and some devices will give you a sweat rate. And I was quite interested. I'm always quite skeptical. So I always just want to make sure that they are measuring these things correctly. I mean, of course, they're not doing it absolutely correctly, but a friend of mine did this experiment for me. Of course, it's not a scientific experiment, it's anecdotal, but when Garmin said that her sweat rate was going up and she had measured it, so it's almost like it's correlated. So I think it is a decent device or metric for you to use to guide you. Don't read into it, of course, with all of these, but yes, you can consider that. And of course, if, as I mentioned, if you are someone who has very salty sweat and you see that residue, then you will require a bit more electrolytes in your nutrition strategy as well. And again, sorry, it's just from a personal perspective, what I've done when you're running through Hout Bay. So you come down Chapman's Peak, it's very hot. It's a part of the race that doesn't have any shade at all. And so I normally take a rehydrate and I throw that into my carb-filled drink around that time as well. Doesn't taste amazing, but I sip on that all the way through, because that's a very, very hot part of the race, especially if you are running like me towards the back of the pack.
Good. Yeah, that's a good thing to note as well. Just little anecdotes around certain places on the route. Sean, I know we are going to, much closer to the time, talk about specifics around strategy for nutrition, how to plan for that on race day. But are there any other considerations and things as we are approaching getting closer to race day, things we should be thinking around nutrition and how to plan for this, the hydration side of things? Anything from your side?
Yeah, definitely. So you need to be practicing this. Okay, so that is key. So play with lots of different things. If you live up on the Highvelds in Joburg and Pretoria, obviously it's been very hot. Might not be that hot in Cape Town, but it might be windy. So you want to play around with many, many different things. You want to keep an eye out on the Two Oceans website. They will release closer to the time their water tables, what they generally will have on those water tables. And so you can plan your race day and your nutrition for that specifically, but also to keep an eye out, because often they'll release who their sponsors are of the nutrition. And so then if you know that it's Coca-Cola, which is normally then Powerade, or if it's Energade or whoever it is, you can then go out and practice your long runs with that exact product, so that you know then on race day that is going to work for you. And then, of course, yes, just starting to plan that nutrition. And as we mentioned, find someone who, hopefully, if you have friends going down with you, or partner or spouse, or your friends down in Cape Town who can perhaps be at a certain point for you, so that you can have someone who seconds you and can replenish your stock, so you don't have to look like you're going on a picnic when you're running the 56K up Constantia Nek. So yeah, that would be key. But of course, if you don't have someone seconding you, you are going to have to rely on the tables, and the tables are great. They really, really are. And often people have stuff on the sides of the roads as well. But again, of course, only if you've practiced that in your training, make sure that, to then take that in. Awesome.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so look, there's a lot here to consider. And again, I know for a lot of people, this is actually quite a new concept. As much as it shouldn't be, it very often is. So I think maybe just the challenge to you as the listener is to go out and get practicing. As Shona said, now's the time to be doing it, playing around, figuring out what works. And it'll be great to hear your feedback in the comment sections as well. So drop us a comment. Feel free, obviously, questions, but drop us a comment. Let us know, I tried this for the first time, or I tried to take in maybe a little bit more, and this is how I felt. I'd really like to kind of get that feedback from you guys as well. Sean, as always, great information. Good to have you with us. looking forward to the next couple of episodes. We're really starting to get there, getting well into the thick of things. So looking forward to the rest of the journey. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.